Thank you. Just working it out here. Hello and thank you. I really appreciate it.
Breathe deeply and speak loudly.
Okay. I really appreciate what you were just speaking about because it really helps me get clear about my question. And I would like help in feeling my way into the vortex relative to the animal kingdom, and in particular when I see animals in situations that feel troublesome to me, like feedlots, puppy farms, just, you see situations that seem as if the animals are struggling.
Here's the thing that is really interesting about your question. And it's a fabulous place to begin because it is the subject that when we talk about it, because people like you ask, Jerry and Esther get hate mail. Because no one likes what Abraham says about it if they're outside the vortex. Because we won't empathize with the problem that they have focused. Now, the most interesting thing about this is that if you were in the vortex, it's exactly what we were talking about seeing the world from inside the vortex or from outside the vortex. And when you are inside the vortex, knowing what the source within you knows, and knowing what the inner being of all of those animals who are choosing to come forth knows, we can understand how a human outside the vortex watching a lion kill a deer would say, why in the world would source or God allow that? And why would a deer be willing to come forth to that end? Why would a deer be willing to do that? Something must be really wrong with this process of creation. And we say, that's an outside the vortex point of view, but the deer made the decision to come forth into this physical environment from inside the vortex. Right. You got to step back and look at the big picture. And there are some things that you have to know before anything that we say to you is going to make any sense or soothe you at all. Okay. First and most important is that no one comes forth, and we're talking about any consciousness that becomes physical anything. No consciousness comes forth into this physical environment without full understanding of what it's coming into. Now, if you really want to ask an important question, you might say, so my body is made up of trillions of cells, each one of which is a consciousness. That seems like a pretty crummy life.
Yeah, I mean,
all crowded in there together in my skin.
Oh, okay.
Did the cells of my body really know, Abraham, that they were going to be abused in this way? When that lady lost 150 pounds, how many of her cells did she sacrifice? I expect quite a few of them croaked during that process, and they got pretty hungry before they croaked, I'm thinking.
It's true.
So, when you understand that consciousness comes forward, and the advantage that the animals have is that they don't stand outside the vortex like humans do. Your animals are inside the vortex beings. That's why you acknowledge that they have what you call instinct or intuition. Your scientists have been noting how remarkable they are. You watch a flock of birds in flight, and it's as if they are operating from one mind. And they are.
And that's where I get stuck, because it's like if they're inside the vortex...
But you are arguing for your outside the vortex position. That's the thing that we're trying... We cannot ever convince you, as you look at your outside the vortex data and pictures and websites and forums, we cannot ever convince you that what you're looking at is not a reality. It is a reality. The only thing that we can talk to you about is which side of the bounce are you taking. And we just got to say to you that the animals coming in know what they're coming into and have chosen this side of the bounce. In other words, they're not fretting over it. They're not worried about it. They're not in those cages complaining. They're not. Okay. They're not. They're coping. They're coping, and they're coping in ways that you would find repressive. You don't like jail or school.
Okay. And they choose it because they then advance to a bigger perspective?
They choose it because from their perspective, it is something worth choosing. You see, the chicken doesn't later on become a turkey and then later on get to become a ostrich and then later become a human. It's not like that. It's not like that at all. It's that there is consciousness. There is this stream of consciousness that joyously participates at all levels. And the joy that any consciousness is having is not because it is comparing itself to what other consciousnesses are living. The joy that any consciousness is living in the moment is the joy that it lives by taking the bounce side, the inside the vortex side of the vibrational wave. Did you get that? It's the first time we've said that. We'll say it again because we really want you to hear it. The joy that any consciousness, whether it's a cell, whether it's a one-celled amoeba, whether it's a chicken in a cage, whether it's a lion running through the jungle, whether it's a human, the joy that any consciousness feels in any moment is not because is not about its relativity to other consciousnesses. In other words, the cat isn't comparing itself to the dog. Oh, he likes you better than me. The chicken isn't comparing itself to the rabbit. Oh, you got to run free longer than I did. Okay. There isn't any of that. The comparison is not from person to person or animal to animal or animal to person. They're not comparing themselves and wanting to move up an evolutional ladder in the way that humans outside the vortex in their craziness can conceive of. The satisfaction in any moment is the comparison between the wave or the vibrational consciousness of the individual consciousness. In other words, a human whose source is in the vortex, who reaches for the vibration that allows alignment, has a satisfying moment of well-being. The chicken, even the chicken in the cage or the puppy in the whatever, has an inner being who is in the vortex, and those animals are tuning themselves constantly to the vibration of their being and finding satisfaction. That's why they're willing to come forth. They don't care where they be in the experience of leading edge time-space reality, because they are more certain than humans are of their alignment with who they are. Okay. Friends, we know some of you will send letters, but this is leading edge understanding. In other words, you can't sort it out any other way. Think about it. Let's take a really extreme conversation. Let's talk about humans and human suffering and human death. So humans suffer more around the idea of death or around the idea of the death of those that they care about than all other subjects put together. And yet you all accept that what you call death is a natural part of what you call life. In other words, there's not one of you that believes that you or anyone else is going to come into these physical bodies and remain indefinitely. You all know that there will be what you are calling the physical ending of this physical beingness. You accept that. And we just would like to put it out to you. How do you square that? How do you square that with your reason for coming forth at all? In other words, the way humans think of death makes it impossible for them to understand their beingness at all. Right. You have criminalized it. You have demonized it. You have made it. Mm-hmm. You have made it an awful thing. Now we know you're not talking about death. You're talking about suffering. But you suffer over death. And so what we're getting at here is when you understand that all consciousness has the opportunity to be in a moment of joy, as that consciousness, one-celled amoeba or full-blown human, as that consciousness aligns with the consciousness of source, and that your pain is about not alignment, and your joy is about alignment, and your suffering is about not alignment, and your exhilaration is about alignment. When you get it, that is about tuning yourself up, then we think you will stop trying to assume the identity of the animals, which you can't do, and you're doing it in a way that they would never do it anyway, and you're using that bogus, ridiculous perspective as your excuse to hold yourself outside the vortex. So you're suffering over the chicken, and the chicken isn't.
I hear that. Thank you.
There is so much physicality that wouldn't even be physicality if it weren't being called forth for the raising of food. So humans would say, well, I would rather not be born at all than be born to be eaten later. And we say, but you're not being raised for food, not in most cases. Every day for lunch, Esther makes Jerry show his finger to her. She feels to see, and she always says, you need to have dessert, otherwise when the witch comes, she will take me. But Esther is kidding. She really doesn't think that anyone's going to come and eat her anytime soon, but she knows that she would be a very good meal if they did. So we just want you to know that the animals are not worried, you see. And we tell the story, you've probably heard it, because it's the one that we always tell when someone asks this. But Jerry and Esther's little chicken, they named her Renegade because she wouldn't stay in the yard with the other chickens. And one day she kept going over to the neighbor's yard. There were 5 acres over there, and a dog, a very big, vicious dog named Snuggles. And one day, Jerry felt a very strong urge to go out, and he went out, and sure enough, Snuggles had Renegade. And Renegade was hanging like a limp rag, and Snuggles was running away. And Jerry yelled, Snuggles! And because Snuggles is a domesticated dog, and therefore prone to some human guilt, Snuggles dropped Renegade when Jerry yelled. And when the chicken hit the ground, she just shook herself off and ran home. And Esther said, Abraham, I thought Snuggles was dead. And we said, Snuggles was just getting ready to be dead. Oh. In other words, no point in hanging around for that part. Consciousness leaves just at the perfect moment. In other words, when you're in alignment, you see. And so we think, bless your heart, that there is far too much human suffering over something that you can't control, right, over something that is none of your business, okay, and because you are choosing a point of view that the source within you does not choose. You are not suffering over the animals. That's not why your heart aches. You are suffering because you are looking at it in a way that the source within you is not looking. Yes. And if you could band together, if you could manage to disrupt your physical pattern of environment and food through your worry about those kinds of things, your planet would not be a better place. In other words, you will never be able, you could legislate people and you will just eat, you'll just kill corn and carrots. Right.
No, I understand that. That's right.
However do you decide? Soon we'll have a conversation, Abraham. There are these carrots, and do you know that they spend most of their life with their head buried deep in the dirt? And they're only allowed to see the sunshine just for a moment before someone eats them.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. I've gotten a lot of clarity.
One day, Jerry and Esther found one of their chickens had been devoured by something. She found a little pile of the parts it didn't want, feathers and so forth, and she was very disgruntled about it. And we said to her, what did you have for lunch? And Esther said, we eat strangers' chickens.